They say that love is blind, but suspicion? Suspicion has perfect night vision. 2 weeks before my world collapsed into a calculated legal warfare, I did something that felt like the ultimate betrayal of my marriage vow. I secretly stripped my own life of every asset I had built, moving everything into an ironclad fortress. At the time, I felt like a paranoid monster. But 14 days later, when my wife sat me down with a chillingly calm smile and a stack of divorce papers, I realized I hadn't committed a betrayal. I had survived an execution. If you think you know how far someone will go to rewrite your history and erase your existence for a fresh start, wait until you hear how her master plan blew up right at her face. Let's roll back the clock. I'm not a guy who looks for ghosts in the closet. Olivia and I had been together for more than half a decade, married for 4 years. We were that solid, predictable couple our friends used as a benchmark for stability. We had our rhythm, inside jokes that made no sense to anyone else, spontaneous road trips, and an unspoken agreement on how we managed our lives. I felt entirely secure. Until about 6 months ago. It started with micro shifts, the kind of subtle anomalies you instinctively dismiss, because admitting them means admitting something is deeply wrong. Olivia, who used to leave her phone casually face up on the kitchen counter for days, suddenly developed an inseparable attachment to it. It accompanied her to the bathroom, to the laundry room, even while she was just grabbing a glass of water. One evening, trying to keep things light, I chuckled and said, "What's in there, Olivia?" Planning a secret corporate takeover. She didn't laugh. She just gave a tight, defensive smile and said, "Just heavy work emails, honey." A week later, a passcode appeared on her device. We had never hidden our passwords from each other. When I asked about it, her answer was a polished, vague script about cybersecurity updates and hacker threats. I chose to let it go, hiding my growing unease. Then came the isolated phone calls. If the phone rang while we were watching a movie, she wouldn't answer it at the table anymore. She would step out onto the balcony or retreat deep into the guest bedroom, whispering in hushed, urgent tones. Whenever she returned and I casually asked who it was, the answer was always identical, just a colleague from the office. The final red flag was the face-down phone habit. It's an unspoken, psychological tell. One afternoon, I reached across the table to hand her a napkin, and she literally flinched, swiftly sliding her phone away as if I were trying to steal a state secret. It was a split-second reaction, but it burned itself into my mind. The emotional distance grew like a slow frost. Conversations that used to flow effortlessly now felt like an interrogation. If I brought up our upcoming wedding anniversary or mentioned setting up a savings goal for a new house, she would offer a distant nod, mutter, "Yeah, we'll see about that," and immediately steer the conversation elsewhere. The turning point happened on a completely ordinary Thursday. Olivia mentioned she was meeting an old college friend for a quick coffee after a shift. Coincidentally, I was running errands just 2 blocks away from that exact coffee shop. Thinking it would be a pleasant surprise, I decided to swing by and buy them a round of pastries. But when I pulled up across the street, Olivia wasn't sitting inside with her girlfriend. She was pacing up and down the alleyway outside the cafe, her phone pressed tightly to her ear. Her posture was tense, her face flushed with an intense gravity. I stayed in my car, the engine idling. I didn't mean to spy, but as I rolled down my window slightly, her voice carried across the quiet pavement. I caught fragmented sentences. "Almost everything is ready, and we can start completely fresh very soon." My stomach dropped as if the ground beneath my car had vanished. It didn't sound like a stressful work crisis. It sounded like a manifesto. It sounded like a strategy. When she arrived home later that evening, I tried to play the role of the oblivious husband. "How was the coffee date?" I asked, pouring her a glass of water. She launched into an elaborate, overly detailed story about her friend complaining about a bad relationship. It was a performance, and it was terrifyingly good. Before we start the next chapter, where things take a sudden financial turn, I need a small favor from you. If you appreciate these deeply personal, real-life narratives, please consider subscribing to Whisper Tales right now. It takes a second, it's completely free, and it helps our small channel stay alive in the vast YouTube algorithm. Thank you for standing by me. Now, let's get back to the story. A few days later, over dinner, Olivia dropped a bomb disguised as casual administrative organization. "I've been thinking," she said, looking at me with an unreadable expression. "We should consolidate all our financial records. Passwords, deeds, bank account numbers, investment portfolios, everything in one secure digital file, just in case of an emergency." I froze. In 4 years of marriage, we had always maintained separate banking structures with just one shared account for mutual household bills. It worked perfectly for us. "What kind of emergency are you expecting?" I asked, keeping my voice utterly level. She shrugged, her eyes darting back to her screen. "Oh, just life stuff. What if one of us gets into an accident? Or what if a sudden, massive financial decision needs to be made instantly? It's just mature planning." On the surface, the logic was flawless. But the delivery? It felt entirely rehearsed. like a speech she had practiced in front of a mirror while waiting for the perfect moment to deploy it. Deep down, internal alarms were blaring. Why this sudden obsession with my financial access, right when she was talking about starting fresh in dark alleys? The next morning, while she was at work, I logged into our shared household account. I began tracking the transaction history over the past 2 months. Nothing massive stood out at first glance, but as I dug deeper, I noticed a pattern of consistent, small cash withdrawals. $50 here, $80 there. None of it was mapped to groceries, utilities, or shared subscriptions. Olivia was systematically draining liquidity from the edges. I knew that if I confronted her without absolute proof, I would look like a jealous, unhinged conspiracy theorist. But if my gut instinct was right, I was standing on a sinking ship, and she was the one drilling holes in the hull. I picked up the phone and called the one person who could give me objective, cold advice. An old university friend named Julian, who practiced family law in the city. "Listen to me carefully," Julian said after I laid out the phone habits, the cafe conversation, and the financial probing. "I'm not saying she's definitely planning an exit strategy, but you aren't crazy for wanting to protect yourself. If you have assets that you built prior to this marriage or resources you cannot afford to lose, the window to shield them is right now. Once a filing hits the court, your hands are legally tied. Better to be safe and wrong than trusting and ruined." Sitting in my empty living room, looking at the photos of our wedding day on the wall, making the decision to protect myself felt like a mourning ritual. It felt like admitting that the love of my life had become my legal adversary. But survival instinct is a powerful force. I opened my laptop, pulled up every single document, bank statements, corporate investments, and the deed to the property my family had helped me secure, and prepared to build my defense. I called my mother that evening, my voice trembling as I asked her to hold onto my life's work. Little did I know, the trap Olivia was setting for me was far more sinister than a simple asset split, and my countermove was about to shock her entire legal team to the core. I called my mother that evening, my voice trembling as I asked her to hold onto my life's work. I didn't give her the agonizing details. I just told her it was a temporary safeguard, a precaution just in case the ground beneath my feet gave way. There was a heavy silence on the line. She could hear everything I wasn't saying. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice tight with maternal worry. I lied and told her I was fine. She didn't push. She just promised to stand by me, giving me a rare anchor of stability in a world that was rapidly dissolving into chaos. By the time Olivia walked through the front door that night, the gears were already in motion. Over the next 72 hours, I executed an ironclad plan. With Julian's guidance, I legally transferred the vast majority of my independent assets, my personal savings, long-term investments, and the deed to the property, into a legally sealed, uncontested trust under my mother's name. I left just enough liquidity in our mutual household account to maintain perfect appearances. When Olivia came home, she kissed my cheek, completely oblivious, and asked what movie we should stream. Outwardly, I smiled and played the part. Inwardly, I was hollowed out by a devastating mix of guilt and relief. Part of me felt like a traitor executing a midnight raid on my own marriage. But another part of me knew I was simply putting on a life jacket before the ship hit the iceberg. For the next 2 weeks, an eerie, suffocating normalcy settled over our home. Olivia actually became more attentive, almost unusually cheerful. She brought up mundane topics, chatted about her workday, and suggested recipes for dinner. But instead of putting my mind at ease, this sudden warmth only heightened my paranoia. The financial prodding had vanished entirely from her vocabulary, as if the subject had been wiped from her memory the moment I questioned her. Every now and then, I would catch her staring at me when she thought I wasn't looking, a cold, analytical gaze, as if she were taking my emotional temperature, calculating exactly how much leverage she held. The silence was louder than any argument we had ever had. Olivia wasn't dropping her plans. She was letting the waters calm before making her definitive move, and I was simply counting down the days. The hammer dropped on a rainy Friday night. She walked into the living room, turned off the television, and sat directly across from me on the couch. Her posture was rigid, her expression entirely wiped of emotion. "We need to talk," she said. My stomach bottomed out. I knew the script before she even opened her mouth. I think we should get a divorce, she continued. Her voice wasn't angry. It wasn't sorrowful. It was a freezing, corporate delivery, as casual as telling me we had run out of coffee. She rolled out a flawless monologue of standard separation platitudes. She talked about needing personal space, about finding her lost identity, about how we had simply grown apart. But then, her tone sharpened into something darker. I've made a lot of sacrifices for you over the years, and you've never truly appreciated them, she said, leaning forward. I deserve more. That line didn't just sting. It rewired my sorrow into absolute clarity. She wasn't just asking for a clean break. She was framing the narrative to justify an incoming execution. She was setting the stage to claim that everything I had built was rightfully hers. As I sat there, absorbing the chilling transformation of the woman I used to love, she let slip the final piece of the puzzle. A friend of mine has been helping me see things clearly, she murmured, looking away. A friend. The phantom on the other end of the encrypted phone calls. The voice in the alleyway. Suddenly, everything clicked. Olivia hadn't come to this decision through months of painful internal reflection. Someone had been whispering in her ear, feeding her resentment, inflating her ego, and helping her build a strategy to strip me of everything I owned. The sacrifice claim was a total fabrication. For years, I had poured my life into making her happy. When she wanted to move closer to her new job, I agreed, taking on a brutal 2-hour commute without a single complaint. When she wanted to attend an exorbitant luxury retreat, I quietly reworked our entire budget, sacrificing my own long-awaited vacation so she could go. I backed her through 2 sudden career pivots, taking on the financial weight of the household alone because I wanted her to feel fulfilled. I had been a present, loving, and deeply committed partner. But none of that mattered anymore. The woman sitting across from me was a stranger executing a hostile takeover. Instead of fighting, begging, or screaming, I simply took a deep breath and gave a slow nod. If that's truly how you feel, then I guess we should figure out the legal steps, I said quietly. She blinked, momentarily startled by my complete lack of resistance. She expected a war of words. She expected me to plead for our marriage. But my focus had already shifted entirely. I needed to know who this friend was and exactly how deep this betrayal ran. Olivia moved out into a temporary apartment the very next day, and by Monday morning, her opening salvo arrived. The divorce papers were delivered to my office. It wasn't a standard asset-splitting petition. It was an absolute demolition contract. She was demanding the house, the car, half of my independent savings, a massive portion of my personal investments, and an aggressive, ongoing spousal support package that made 0 sense given her own high-paying corporate salary. She wasn't just trying to start fresh. She was trying to bleed me completely dry. The sheer venom of the demands confirmed my worst fears. She had a professional guiding her hand from the shadows, and I was determined to find out exactly who it was. I started digging into the digital trail. Since she hadn't blocked me on social media yet, I began auditing her accounts with microscopic precision. I bypassed her rare public posts and focused entirely on the comments and likes from the past 6 months. That's when a recurring name surfaced: Ethan. Every single photo, every casual update, Ethan was always there, leaving subtle, encouraging remarks. I clicked on his public profile. On the surface, he was just a 30-something marketing strategist at her firm. But as I scrolled down his feed, my blood turned to ice. Weeks prior, on the exact Thursday, I had spotted Olivia pacing frantically outside the downtown cafe. Ethan had posted a geotagged photo from that identical location. The caption read, "Building blueprints for a brand new future." My chest tightened as I scrolled further, finding a recent reflection selfie he had taken inside a glass lobby. In the background, through the window, I recognized the distinct brick facade of a new apartment complex Olivia had just moved into. It wasn't an ironclad legal confession, but it was all the proof I needed. She wasn't just leaving me. She was jumping straight into a prearranged life with a co-conspirator, using my hard-earned assets as their foundation. Desperate for confirmation, I reached out to Chloe, a mutual friend who had known Olivia for years. I kept the tone casual, asking if she had heard from my ex or knew how she was holding up. Chloe's response was instant, defensive, and completely unnatural. "I don't know anything about her personal life or who she's seeing," she snapped, cutting the call short. Her panic spoke volumes. Next, I dialed Lucas, another close contact in our social circle. I tried to sound like a broken husband, just looking for answers. Lucas hesitated, giving vague, clipped responses before abruptly hanging up the phone. I sat there in the silence of my empty house, frustration boiling over. But 10 minutes later, my phone lit up. It was Lucas calling back. "Look," he whispered, his voice trembling with nerves. "This can't ever come back to me, okay? But you don't deserve what they're doing to you." I gave him my word of absolute secrecy. After a long, heavy pause, Lucas revealed the truth. Olivia had been secretly seeing Ethan from her office for months. But it wasn't just an affair. Lucas confirmed that Ethan was actively orchestrating the divorce strategy, feeding Olivia legal talking points, and pushing her to demand maximum assets so they could fund their new lifestyle together. Hearing the confirmation aloud felt like a physical blow, but the burning anger quickly crystallized into an icy resolve. They thought they had cornered an oblivious, broken man. They had no idea they were walking directly into a minefield I had laid 2 weeks ago. The first formal mediation session felt like walking into a corporate boardroom execution. When I stepped inside with Julian, Olivia and her high-priced attorney were already seated. Her lawyer looked remarkably smug, resting his hands on a document binder so thick it looked like they were preparing a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against a Fortune 500 company. Without wasting a breath, her attorney began reading off their list of demands with absolute, unshakable confidence. He spoke as if their terms were completely non-negotiable. He demanded the immediate transfer of the marital home's title to Olivia, the liquidation and split of my independent savings, half of my long-term investment portfolios, the primary vehicle, and a staggering monthly spousal support package. He justified the support by citing Olivia's alleged career sacrifices during our marriage. I sat there in total silence, looking at Olivia. She wouldn't meet my eyes. She just stared at the mahogany table, her jaw set, looking entirely confident that she was about to erase my financial existence. I looked over at Julian, who simply gave me a barely perceptible nod. We let her attorney speak for a full 10 minutes without interrupting once. When he finally finished his presentation, he slid the binder across the table. "We believe these terms are more than fair given the circumstances," he said, leaning back in his leather chair. Julian didn't look at the binder. Instead, he opened his own briefcase, pulled out a neat, stapled stack of notarized documents, and slid them across the table toward Olivia's lawyer. "Before we waste any time discussing a settlement," Julian said, his voice terrifyingly calm, "I think it is vital for everyone in this room to thoroughly review these asset declarations." Olivia's lawyer gave a dismissive shrug, picked up the paperwork, and began to skim the first page. The change in the room's atmosphere was instantaneous. His smug expression vanished. His posture went completely rigid, and his eyebrows furrowed deeper and deeper with every single page he flipped. "What exactly is this?" her lawyer asked, his voice suddenly losing its sharp edge as he looked up at Julian. "Those documents verify the legal transfer of all major independent assets, including the property deed, the primary capital investments, and the savings portfolios, into an irrevocable, legally binding trust under my client's mother's name," Julian explained, speaking slowly and deliberately. "As you can see from the verified timestamps, these transfers were fully executed and finalized several weeks before your client filed for divorce. Those documents verify the legal transfer of all major independent assets, including the property deed, the primary capital investments, and the savings portfolios, into an irrevocable, legally binding trust under my client's mother's name," Julian explained, speaking slowly and deliberately. "As you can see from the verified timestamps, these transfers were fully executed and finalized several weeks before your client filed for divorce. The trust is completely legal, uncontested, and entirely outside the jurisdiction of these proceedings. The room became so quiet you could hear the ticking of the wall clock. Olivia's lawyer turned his head toward her, his face flushed with frustration. "You didn't mention any of this to me," he said flatly. Olivia snatched the paperwork out of her attorney's hands, her eyes racing across the notarized signatures and legal stamps. Her face went completely pale, turning from smug confidence to pure, unadulterated rage. She slammed the papers down and glared across the table at me, her teeth clenched. "You planned this," she hissed, her voice trembling. "You knew I was going to file. You intentionally set this whole thing up just to screw me over." I didn't say a word. I just leaned back, crossed my arms, and let her sit in the reality of her own failed trap. My silence only made her angrier, but her lawyer quickly put a hand on her arm to quiet her down. He tried to find a loophole, questioning the validity of the dates, but Julian was 5 steps ahead. Every single document was bulletproof. The signatures were certified, the trust was ironclad, and the timing was completely indisputable. There was absolutely nothing they could do. The session ended abruptly with her lawyer muttering something about needing to recess and reevaluate their legal strategy. But everyone in that room knew the truth. Their entire hostile takeover had crumbled to dust in a matter of seconds. When we walked out into the hallway, Olivia rushed ahead and intercepted me near the elevators. Her face was a warped mask of fury and desperation. "This isn't over," she whispered fiercely. "You're going to deeply regret doing this to me." I finally looked her dead in the eyes. "The only thing I regret, Olivia, is trusting you in the first place. That's a mistake I will never make again." What followed over the next month was a complete and total meltdown. When Olivia realized that the legal system wasn't going to hand her my life's work on a silver platter, she went into a frenzy. It started with the phone calls. Endless, frantic voicemails. At first, she tried a remorseful, gentle tone. Her messages would say things like, "Please, we just need to sit down and talk," or "I know things got incredibly messy, but we can still fix this together." But when I refused to reply, her facade cracked entirely. Within 48 hours, her messages alternated wildly between sobbing apologies and screaming rants. She would spend 5 minutes crying about how much she missed our life, and then immediately launch into a venomous tirade, calling me cruel, selfish, and cold, blaming me for every single thing that had ever gone wrong in her life. I blocked her number and routed all further communication strictly through Julian. But she wasn't done. She began spinning a desperate narrative to our mutual friends, claiming that the entire divorce filing was just a giant misunderstanding, a relationship test she had staged because she felt ignored. But the cracks in her story were too wide to ignore. Our friends began asking obvious questions. If it was just a test, why did she hire a high-priced aggressive lawyer? Why did she draft specific legal documents demanding the house and spousal support? When the test narrative failed, she tried to play the ultimate victim, telling everyone that my defensive financial moves had deeply traumatized her and broken the sacred trust of our marriage. For a brief moment, a few distant acquaintances believed her, sending me judgmental messages about being too harsh. But the truth has a beautiful way of forcing its way to the surface. A few weeks later, a mutual friend named Brandon contacted me out of the blue, asking to meet up at a quiet diner. When we sat down, Brandon looked incredibly uncomfortable. He slid his phone across the table toward me. "Look, man, I didn't want to get involved in your business," Brandon said, shaking his head. "But I can't sit back and watch her destroy your reputation when she's the one who engineered this entire nightmare." I looked down at the screen. It was a long series of leaked text message screenshots between Olivia and Ethan. Apparently, Ethan had been bragging to a coworker about how he was pulling the strings behind Olivia's divorce to secure a massive financial payout for their new life together. That coworker, disgusted by the predatory behavior, took screenshots and passed them along to Brandon. The texts were chillingly cold. Olivia wasn't just venting about an unhappy marriage. She and Ethan were actively calculating how much money they could drain from me. One text from Olivia read, "Once the judge approves the support terms and the house sale, will have more than enough to buy the downtown condo. I just need to keep playing the victim so he doesn't fight back. Ethan's reply was right underneath. Don't back down. Make him feel guilty for everything. He owes you this lifestyle. We start our real life the second that check clears. Holding that phone, seeing the black and white proof of their calculated malice, any remaining trace of grief inside me vanished, replaced by an ironclad sense of closure. This wasn't a tragic marital breakdown. It was a premeditated financial hit that I had narrowly survived. Brandon shared those screenshots with our core group of friends, and the fallout was instantaneous. The social circle Olivia had tried to weaponize against me turned their backs on her overnight. People who had stayed neutral or defended her suddenly saw her for exactly what she was, a master manipulator. Her closest allies quietly distanced themselves, leaving her entirely isolated. By the time the final divorce hearing arrived, Olivia's confidence was utterly shattered. Realizing they had zero legal leverage and that their private text trail was circulating, her lawyer quietly advised her to drop all aggressive demands. The divorce was finalized with a clean break. She walked away with only her personal belongings. And Ethan? The moment it became completely clear that Olivia wasn't walking away with a massive financial windfall, he vanished from her life. He requested a transfer to a different regional office, leaving her to deal with the wreckage of the fire she had started all by herself. Without her co-conspirator and without her friends, Olivia's final messages to me became utterly pathetic, begging for a simple conversation just to find closure. I never responded. Today, I still live in the house I fought to protect. My mother actually came over last week with a few cans of bright paint, helping me redecorate the space, washing away the last lingering shadows of the past 6 years. For the first time in a very long time, when I walk through my front door, I don't feel tension or suspicion. I just feel an overwhelming sense of profound peace. Olivia is a dark chapter in my history that I have officially closed. The rest of the book belongs entirely to me, and I'm finally ready to start writing.